Thank you all for joining us for Pando Days. My name is Eugene Shirley, and I'm the president of Pando Populous. We're an environmental and social impact accelerator based in Los Angeles County. Pando Days brings the art, design, architecture, and sustainability programs together from 10 Southland colleges and universities to help LA County implement its ambitious new sustainability plan. Each of the participating Pando Days institutions adopted a different goal from the county's plan and created ingenious plans of their own for implementing it. Brainstorming began in the fall of last year with project development over as many as 7 months. Make sure you go to our website, pandopopulous.com, to see all the school project descriptions and their deliverables. We're posting them on a rolling basis between now and the latter part of July. All 10 of the premier events follow the same format. They're hosted by a member of the Pando Populous Board of Directors with the summary presentation of the featured project by the team lead. We'll then have short responses and questions from members of the Chief Sustainability Officer Strategic Task Force for LA County and a period of public Q&A. We'll close by the end of the hour. All projects are being assessed by a panel of judges based on recordings of these presentations and the presentation materials found on the website. When we come together on July 25 for the finale, we'll hear which of the projects they believe have the greatest chance for the greatest impact for county sustainability. The Pando Days hosts for today are John Bielenberg and Beth Cohen. John is a member of the Pando Populous Board. I've known John for many years as a friend and known of him as a legend in design and in the field of design for social impact, where he's really focused on designing designers to create a better world. He hosted the launch of Pando Days in the fall of last year. Beth Cohen is a documentary filmmaker and was the producer of both our launch and Blitz events in October of last year as well, at the La Brea Tar Pits and at the Conrad Hilton Foundation. We're delighted to have you both hosting the premiere event today. John and Beth, thank you very much, and over to you.
Thanks, Eugene. We're happy to be here. Sorry it's not in person as we originally planned, but huge kudos to Eugene and Shelley for pulling this off virtually. That we're doing the best we can, and the presentations have been awesome.
So we are delighted to introduce the USC team and their project CarSick. The project addresses county goal number 8, a convenient, safe, clean, and affordable transportation system that enhances mobility and quality of life while reducing car dependency. The project gets the public to rethink the reliance on cars and to get inspired through fun and games to commit to a future with far less dependence on the private gas guzzling vehicles. This team is led by Matthew Manos, and we'll introduce him in just a minute. But first, John, let me turn it back to you to just talk a little bit about the importance of this and then to turn the baton over to Matt.
Sure, yeah. Using a car for transportation in dense urban areas is absolutely insane. And I had this experience. I remember I was in San Francisco and I was riding my bike along the Embarcadero. There's a bike path, and it was around rush hour one evening, and I was zipping along and all the cars were just stuck in bumper to bumper traffic. And I just had this epiphany that the car, even though they've evolved to be these kind of amazing machines that envelop you in luxury, are an incredibly bad solution to moving people around dense urban areas, not even to mention the ecological impact of combustion engines. And I was just thinking that if you were to design from scratch, starting now, you would never design cities with individuals in individual cars. So I think, LA is almost the poster child for this dysfunction. And I think that this project, is so essential to move us past.
I've been playing with this website for an hour, and it's really weird.
Are we getting feedback? Anyway, I think this is a great project. And I'm going to turn it over to my friend Matthew, who we've known each other for several years, both being very involved in design for social impact. And I think at the beginning, we launched this project, we did an exercise called Think NATO, which really gets teams to think about alternative. We call it thinking wrong. And I think this is one of the projects that grabbed onto that alternative thinking. So off to you, Matthew.
All right, thanks so much, John. And thanks everybody for being here. I'm joined by one of my students, Andrew, as well, and want to just give a quick shout out to Stephanie and Ashley from our team who couldn't make it today. But Andrew and I are thrilled to share with you our project, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Great. All right, what if I were to tell you that there is a massive 2.7 million foot long monument in Los Angeles that is a symbol for racism and environmental degradation? In fact, this monument is so baked into our daily lives as Angelenos, we couldn't even imagine tearing it down. This monument is the freeway, and the first freeway in the region was the Arroyo Seco Parkway, also known as the 110. As Angelenos, our identity and culture is so attached to car culture. True story, when I was in the Ukraine last year, I was drinking at a bar with locals in Kyiv. Earlier that day, they took me out for dumplings and a tour of the city's brutalist architecture. I asked them if they had any questions about Los Angeles or the United States, and the first thing they asked me, do people really dance on the freeway there? In reference to the Oscar-winning movie, La La Land. Freeways are terrible for 4 reasons. Number 1, the environment.
Cars and trucks emit carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. And these gases contribute to 1/5 of our country's total global warming pollution.
Second, health and safety.
Proximity to heavy traffic has been linked to increased asthma severity, cancer and early deaths, not to mention the amount of deaths from high-speed accidents each year. And a recent Harvard study points to a potential link to higher COVID-19 death rates among people who live close to a highway.
Third, social justice.
A recent LA Times article by Matthew Flesher points out the construction of our freeways was fueled by a vision for a more segregated LA, rerouting construction plans to intentionally destroy thousands of homes in racially diverse communities.
And fourth, local economic resilience.
Freeways incentivize traveling further distances to shop and dine, leaving many local businesses in the dust.
Los Angeles would simply be a better place without freeways. We'd have more diverse communities, more green space, more housing, less pollution, more hyper-local economic activity, and more people walking in LA. Our team's vision is a Los Angeles without freeways. In conceptualizing a project to tackle this massive problem, we were confronted with a predicament. Freeways and car culture are so ingrained into our culture as Angelenos that unlearning this reliance is a massive educational hurdle. This is where CarSick steps in. CarSick is an interactive curriculum that teaches students about the history of the Arroyo Seco Parkway and provides a platform for imagining alternative futures for freeway spaces in Los Angeles. Oh, and it all takes place in the back of a car that's driving up and down the 110 freeway. The interactive workshop is packed with readings, activities, and discussions that are all timed to be completed before reaching certain freeway exits.
In the car, we explore case studies from around the globe of freeways that had been repurposed for the good of the community.
We challenge riders to draw a picture of a bicycle from memory and to build something that moves using Lego.
We read a script from Who Framed Roger Rabbit about the red car conspiracy and from Folklore of the Freeway by Erica Villa, who discusses the freeway's history of racial injustice.
We brainstorm alternative uses for the freeway and more. What makes it fun, though, is the speed at which the activities can be completed varies depending on traffic. If things are moving slow, you've got more time to discuss. If things are moving fast, so are you. Play, especially when expanded to interactivity and immersive experiences, is also an incredible tool for learning. My wife and I were recently rewatching the 1989 sci-fi classic, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, the other day. If you haven't seen it, it's a story of two metalhead slackers that have to travel time in order to prepare for an oral history report. Throughout their journey, they meet Genghis Khan, Abraham Lincoln, Joan of Arc, and Socrates. And in doing so, they managed to accomplish something they could never do in the classroom: retain key facts about historical events and figures. In the classroom, I do my best to replicate Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure for my own students. Now, I don't have a time machine, but I am a big proponent of challenges in project-based learning in which students can work in teams to tackle problems that have real-world implications. In addition, I'm excited about the potential of applying play to educational experiences that can empower us to engage more critically with our community and local issues. CARSIC aims to be a great example of this. And by the way, so far, everyone that has experienced CARSIC has actually gotten CARSIC. If that isn't experiential learning, I don't know what is.
The curriculum was designed in collaboration with students from the Ivy and Young Academy at USC. The end product is a film that shows in real time what our pilot for the workshop looked like, along with curriculum available for free download to do it on your own, and a concept for a board game version.
And we'll include a link for you to check this stuff out in a bit too. Unfortunately, COVID-19 made it so that we could not go further than our pilot, but should we receive support to push this forward, we would like to continue refining the curriculum, expand to other freeways, and finalize the board game version as well. We would also love to be able to partner with the LAUSD to facilitate this in a school bus as part of an educational field trip with students. Thank you all so much for listening. Let's get CARSIC.
That was fantastic, Matthew. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed the presentation. Now, we're thrilled to be joined today by 5 members of the Chief Sustainability Officer Strategic Task Force for LA County, who will be offering short assessments of the USC initiative and asking 1 to 2 questions each. And after we hear from them, we'll open up for Q&A. So let me first introduce Robin Eason, Senior Sustainability Planner for the City of West Hollywood.
Hi, everyone.
You, Robin.
Oh, thank you so much. And hi, everyone. So great to be here today. I'm so thrilled to be a part of this exercise. I'm going to change my screen here so I'm not just looking at myself, because that's weird. I thoroughly enjoyed, I guess, the experience of CARSIC. And so I just want to commend the USC team for just being really thoughtful about how we might repurpose public space. I think many of you may know that West Hollywood is a 1.9 square mile kind of small city. And so a lot of what I do in the long range planning division is think about how do we utilize public space and like what does that look like if in fact cars do go away. And so it's been nice to kind of dream through this project. And really quick, I just wanted to point out a few things. One, I think the video was probably one of the most enjoyable 20 minutes I've had all year. And I know this year has set a very low bar for a lot of stuff, but I mean that in most sincere way. It was just really, the pop-ups and all of that stuff was great. I love the dynamism of what was going on in the car. There was so much to kind of see and understand, and the way that you were able to kind of lay things out in an organic way with the fuzzy dice, kind of dictating what years you would dream about. Like, I thought that was really great. I love that you recognized the Tongva people, and that you did bring up the fact that highways are very much a culprit of racism. I think that that's really important to just acknowledge and figure out how that comes together and how we think about the future. Have to recognize the past. Let's see, sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. I loved how much I learned after reading through the work script, after reading through the video, after looking through the video, after looking through the Notion notes. That was a lot of work that you all put together to distill into a sort of a gamified deployment. And so just hats off to you all for being able to do that. So I have a number of other comments, but I'll share those at a later time. I don't want to take up too much time. One question I did had was just trying to think of how does this translate into a board game? I think the video really captured the essence of the dynamism of being in the car, and you know, how your experience really depends on traffic and some of the things that are going on in that kind of lived experience. And it feels like the board game aspect of that would probably lose a lot of that. And so what do you do instead, I guess, to make that also a thrilling experience?
Yeah, that is a great question. And, you know, the way that we see the board game happening is, and there's some renderings of this too, is having a mat that essentially serves as a map kind of aerial view of the 110 freeway of the Arroyo Seco Parkway, and have people push cars, little Hot Wheel cars, and land on a specific quadrant. That quadrant would then have a prompt or sort of some sort of lesson associated with it. But you're so right. It would not be, it wouldn't have the as experiential, you know, of a sort of use case as being in the car itself does. But part of where that came from was thinking about accessibility of, you know, if we can't have a group of students, for example, get on a bus or have that time in the teacher's sort of curriculum to do that, at least this could happen. And then now with COVID, it's a socially distanced version, because we actually imagine the mat being at a 6-foot distance as well. All of that pre-COVID, it sort of was just luck in terms of what we were imagining, you know, the scale of it would be as well.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Robin. Next up is Andy Schrader, Director of Environmental Affairs, Water Policy and Sustainability for Los Angeles City Council Member Paul Koretz.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, first of all, to Pando for hosting these terrific days. I remember when this project got started during the brainstorming session. So it's really fun to have see how it's evolved from its inception until now. I really appreciated the recognition that we're on Tongva land. Anytime we talk about climate action of any kind, we always acknowledge that we're on Tongva land here. And in doing so, that really, I think, immediately puts you back in the old days and helps you recognize and imagine Los Angeles without freeways, Los Angeles without buildings, and remember how it was in its pristine state and how we've built everything since then. I was quite taken with the fact that you picked the 110 freeway. The first time I was in Los Angeles as an adult, my brother and his friends picked me up and drove me on the 110 freeway. And one thing I remember is bouncing off the freeway curb as we're driving to Pasadena. And it taught me a really important lesson about freeway driving, and maybe a more important lesson about drunk driving. But so I'm invested in the 110 already. I really appreciated the design, the multimedia or transmedia aspects of it. The video was very fun, interactive, really showed what the participant would be doing. It made me a little car sick to be watching it. So that was effective along your theme. I also appreciated the board game. I can see from your description a second ago how this could be a board game, and having people play board games then gets them off the freeway. And the other thing I appreciated about CarSick in particular is if you're going to play, there's going to be more than one person in a car, so you're carpooling. I don't know if we want people to get on the freeway to play CarSick, or you know, they do it if they just happen to be going the same direction to Pasadena. But I digress. I think what I came to at the end is, as a policymaker in the city of Los Angeles, I'm always wanting to close the deal on what are the next steps. So you've gotten our attention. about freeways. You're helping us visualize what the world can look like without freeways. One of the first things I said to my boss when I first started working for him, LA City Council member Paul Koretz, is before we end our association, I hope that we can shut down a street or a freeway and make a park. So I'm curious what, if you can add or figure out what call to action your players could have in doing this. And I think that's it for now. But thank you. It's a terrific project, and look forward to seeing how it does with the other ones.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really thoughtful comments. And the call to action component is so critical. You know, one of the things we don't want to have happen is people just play this and have some laughs, and then it doesn't change their behavior in any way or their mindset. And I would say, you know, I could have some really visionary goals of basically closing down the 110. That would be so cool. But I think more so I would sort of relate this to kind of like those 6-pack plastic rings that, you know, that soda cans use in the 90s in the classroom. You know, we would always be taught to cut those, and it became sort of second nature. Oh, okay, yeah, you cut those because they could go around a bird's neck or whatever that might be. And, you know, I would say my ultimate call to action for anybody that's playing this is that they do have a moment of perception shift when it comes to freeways. They do have that moment of, oh, wow, I do a lot of things in Pasadena on the weekend instead of in downtown or in Santa Monica or wherever I live. And maybe those little micro shifts could lead to something big. But for now, it's really about how do we kind of change that perspective, especially in younger people who are kind of being brought up in a much different generational view of the environment and of sort of all of the trouble that we've caused as well. So that would be sort of my wish, is that it changes perspective or behavior in some way.
Yeah, Andy, I just wanted to make a comment. I remember in the Pando Blitz, one of your ideas, your team, was to shut down the freeway. So it's kind of funny to see this project come about.
Okay, thanks you two. Now, looking at the script, we have Sister Nancy Lyons, a Maryknoll sister and nurse who served for years in Sudan. She is on the Point team in Monrovia, heading up the reorientation of their convent property to meet the needs of sustainability for LA County.
Good afternoon. It's very nice to be here with Pando and all the faces we know here and have gotten to know. I'm not a native of Los Angeles. I lived many years in San Francisco and the East Bay, and that is very definitely a slower pace of life than Los Angeles is. I live in a very quiet place in Monrovia, foothills, and maybe a couple of times a month I go shopping, and that's about it. So when I go on the freeway, I feel like I've moved into a state of madness, especially the afternoon freeway coming into LA and going out. So I think we have to get rid of it all. If it means stealing all the tires off the cars, and I think maybe if we concentrated on bilocation for ourselves in the next 10 years, really worked hard at it and give it a lot of thought and see what we could come up with, it would be better than the madness that we're living now. That's how I feel about it. I think I've been very affected by a book I've been reading this week about the history of the universe, and it gives a description of everything that was made over and made new and moved on to be something else entirely for the planet. And maybe we need somehow to be made over in our way of thinking about what's really necessary for us besides walking or riding a bicycle. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So next up, we have Catherine Miller, former Chief Sustainability Officer for the Conrad and Hilton Foundation and project manager for their LEED Platinum building in Agora Hills. So turning it to you, Catherine.
Catherine, we'll need you to unmute.
Okay.
Yeah, there you
go. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here, and I'm really glad to be a part of such an amazing project and nonprofit that Pando is and what they're trying to do for LA County and the community. I am calling remotely in from Colorado, but I lived in Los Angeles for 20 years. I wanted to say, thank you to Matt and the USC team, also known as Nightmare, right? I can tell you that I commuted while I lived in Los Angeles pre-COVID to about 800 plus hours annually. So very familiar with the traffic situation, the congestion, and really what it does for quality of life for the community and those that, are impacted, even that live by the freeways. So anyway, Matt, again, the USC team, you guys did an excellent job. I have to tell you that I watched your presentations several times. It reminded me of the driving or coffee in cars with friends. I thought it was a great way to put this together, very creative. I love the fact that, the focus is on blue sky thinking and not limiting thinking. You brought in so many humorous aspects into that video. And I even love the music that was playing in the background. And the props, everything. I also really connected with the historical aspect that you brought into, stories that actually I wasn't aware of as, a newcomer, 20 years with Los Angeles. But it really made me stop and kind of reframe my thinking about what freeways are, what they do, and their impacts, to our culture. So one of the things, I have numerous questions that I wanted to ask, but one of the big ones was, you're going to roll this out to, I imagine elementary, high school, and it's really about changing perspective, reimagining the future. But what about the outcomes of, and the kind of blue sky thinking that will come from interacting and engaging in this game and this thinking? And how will you, what kind of repository will you have for new lines of thinking, creative thoughts, and the outcomes that will come from participating in this? So that's my first question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's sort of two ways to think about the outcomes. One is in the context of let's say a history class that this might be a part of. This could be attached to the teacher's learning outcomes for that particular course. So maybe that is something around learning more about your local history. This could help accomplish that outcome that the Common Core might require. Aside from that, the outcomes from the workshop itself, we do hope that as this scales and hopefully as more people do it, we can be collecting the ideas from them and actually include those ideas in the downloadable material that we then provide with people. So it's sort of, you could see it almost like an ongoing zine that everybody is co-authoring. And where I see that and to the point of kind of perspective shifting is just by reading this, we can say, oh, what if that could be possible, right? It could get us closer to actually being able to accept the fact that we can think beyond the current modes of transportation or even current way of living, which I feel all of the physical distancing we've been doing lately has already sort of taught us how little we possibly need to be entertained in our own homes even. And so, yeah, so I think that's a great question. I would love to be able to feature and capture that work and celebrate it in as many ways as possible, starting with including it in the publication that hopefully would grow over time.
Great. Okay,
Yeah, and just to jump in on that one too, if I may, I just to totally second with what Matthew said is that, like, as we were running towards the very beginning of the ideation stage, you know, we kept running into this challenging question of like, how do we replace the cars, or what do we do with them? But like, we realized, you know, there was a huge question we had to answer before that, and that's like coming to the realization that we even can live without cars in Los Angeles, which is like this insane, you know, mental hurdle that we've got to get over. And so it's kind of an incredible victory to have people sort of engage with these materials and come to that realization on their own of like, oh yeah, you know, maybe we can live without cars.
great.
Yeah, Catherine, you mentioned comedians in cars getting coffee. I thought of the same thing, you know, Matthew. It would be great to get Jerry Seinfeld to do a sequel, Comedians in Cars Throwing Up, where they drive around until they throw up in the back seat.
Wow, I love it.
Okay, you got to get right on that, okay? All right, you guys, thank you so much. Next up, we have Mark Spears, retired Chief Sustainability Officer for Disney. Mark, we'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Beth. And as a fellow Trojan, thank you, Matthew and Andrew, for such a strong performance. I think a lot has been covered in terms of the platitudes of what you've accomplished. And as someone who also lives in Pasadena, spent several decades driving back and forth to campus, sometimes you're so focused from point A to point B, you really lose track of the kind of history and legacy that you're traveling through, certainly on the 110 with the development around it. Question I have might be a little bit compound. It has to do with, you know, a bit of a lift on education and integration is, how do you think about this program as it relates to influencing campus behavior, students and staff, as well as the emphasis on public transportation? We have the Gold Line, which runs largely down the Arroyo Seco and actually offers a different perspective. And given that goal number 8, one of the aspects is reducing car dependency, how do we think about that in an influence or an influencing factor from a behavioral standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, on the campus life comment that the story that I immediately think back to when I was in high school, I imagine this being a good fit for high school age, but also middle school. You know, we would have bike to school days, and everybody would attempt to bike to school. But the interesting thing is, it was a private school, not everybody lived in close proximity to the school. And so what it actually spurred was a lot of conversations around that of, wow, how did you bike all the way to Atherton from Redwood Shores, right? It was a long distance. And for others, it was they biked a couple of blocks. And we would talk about public transit. We would talk about how much time we spend in our cars to get to school typically and all of that. And so when it comes to kind of campus life changing or campus culture, I do hope that it actually possibly points a light at the issues of just distance or of kind of convenience or accessibility that many people face when they're trying to get an education. Again, I think COVID has done that as well, with issues of technological access or not having enough space to have 2 children being on Zoom at the same time, or things like that. You know, I would hope that this would kind of continue that conversation, and then possibly create new rituals around celebrating the way that we get to school as well. You know, so I think those would be a couple of things that come to mind, but it's a really, really thoughtful question.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, everybody. We're now going to open it up for public Q&A. And to moderate that, I want to introduce the Pando Days curator, Adam Ewens.
Thank you, Beth and John. I have one question so far that I'll start with. Drew Lives asks, to move away from fiction, how does removing the cars answers the functions of cars, including raising the quality of life for low-income people, providing mobility and access to materials for artists and tradespeople, and safety for vulnerable persons, including families, and their access to good and materials? So no more blue sky thinking, get practical.
Great. Yeah, back down to planet Earth. No, I think this is a really great question, and it's one that I would hope comes up during the car ride, actually, to discuss and to try to imagine, because what this points me to think, and kind of what my response to this will be, is that we don't have the answers to that because we're so reliant on the way that our current systems and structures are built. We can't imagine not having these kinds of infrastructure, and therefore, if we were to eliminate them or think beyond them, you know, in 20, 30, or 50 years, we might actually have answers to this that are really compelling, right? So for example, if we're talking about, you know, providing mobility and access to materials for artists, a really cool, very specific example, could the elimination of freeways create some kind of new transportation system for materials like these? For example, Andy has the Boring Company's hat on, right? Could we have vessels that are shooting art supplies all over LA and there's pickup spots for that? Could we see a remote work renaissance continue and have a large population of workers not need to actually commute to work? If we didn't have freeways in the first place, could we have avoided a lot of segregation that has caused people to move further from their places of work? And can we somehow rebuild that, right? So those are some initial responses, but it's the kind of conversation I'd like to have in the back of the car too. So hope to see you there.
Mm-hmm. Brant, our board member at Pando, has a question that kind of jumps on that is, there are many proxies for closing down byways or repurposing public transportation that have been made obsolete. The High Line in New York comes to mind. How could we make, we as Pando, we as a city, make a small bet and try this in LA soon? And where would be a likely location?
Yeah, another great question. You know, I think there's been talks of doing this in downtown Los Angeles. And first of all, if anybody that's watching hasn't seen what Cyclavia does, that is a wonderful example of doing just that. They close down really vast distances of streets over the course of a day that is purely for pedestrians or bicyclists. I actually got to participate in Cyclavia in Bogota in Colombia, where that was created as well. And I feel like that already is a small bet that points to the excitement and the participation that events like that have been able to gather. But in particular, I think to try to test this out, it'd be amazing to do it in downtown Los Angeles, where there is already sort of an openness to foot traffic, but there's still, if you drive through it, still a lot of reliance on cars. I think that would be a smaller bet than trying to maybe next step shut down one lane of a freeway and see what happens. Although we don't want people to be in too close a proximity, so that might not be a good idea.
Yeah, Brant has a follow-up there that he says Chandler Boulevard in the San Fernando Valley has a bus throughway and bike and walkways that are built and popular. San Fernando,
Absolutely.
San Francisco, I don't know. San Fernando.
Yeah. I think that is San Fernando. I think I've seen that as well. And there's actually quite a few great examples of people that have done this. There's a friend of mine, Hunter Franks, created a project called 500 Plates, where he shut down a freeway in Akron, Ohio that had been underused and set up a massive dining table where members of the community could come and sit and share a meal together. There's a freeway in Spain that's been completely repurposed. There's a freeway in I think Dallas that is currently going through this process too. So it is happening, and I think LA has yet to really try it or give it a fair try. Aside from the parklets that we've seen that are sort of pop-up parks in place of parking spots, that's been, to my knowledge, the best attempt at something like this in Los Angeles, and hope to see demand rise, for things like that.
Mm-hmm. Of course, cities like Mexico City and Bogota that shut down main avenues every Sunday morning so people can go cycle, which is beautiful in itself. Catherine also had another question. How do you propose to get this program distributed into the marketplace, and at what cost?
Yeah, so the marketplace here I would define as some sort of educational system. Maybe that is aligning with all of LAUSD. Maybe that is at a slightly smaller scale of something like Green Dot Public Schools, etc. And hosting a Train the Trainers program where we can essentially walk through any educator that would be interested in facilitating this car ride or this bus ride with their students. We can get them trained on how to do that. The good news is that we already have a full script for that. So the training itself is pretty much developed, aside from, possibly a short webinar or meeting to help facilitate that. The cost to actually then distribute that, I would say, would come down to being able to subsidize the materials that the school would require. One of those being fuzzy dice, which I'm wearing, but also each student would need access to Legos, and they would need other sort of printed materials to use, as well as the typical Post-its and Sharpie pens. So I would say, the exact cost probably varies based on the size of the initiative, but we're probably talking in the few hundreds of dollars per school to be able to do this. And in addition, in terms of where would it go from there, because to me, that is kind of the smaller bet of the current curriculum. It would be to try to actually create curriculum like this for every freeway in Los Angeles, so that this could be done by any school that is in any close proximity to a freeway, not just the 110, but maybe the 405 would be sort of the next most interesting one to explore, or the 5 or the 10. You all know the list.
Mm-hmm. Or the next part of the 110 all the way to the harbor. That's where
right.
Go through some really interesting neighborhoods and can truly talk about racism and environmental justice.
Absolutely. And if COVID continues, and if field trips are non-existent, this is where the board game would really come into play. And for that, what we had imagined was from a sort of manufacturing standpoint, you're looking at about a 6-foot long mat of a board game, which there's many different distributors or manufacturers that can handle that at a range of quantities, as well as using Hot Wheels cars that we would spray paint hot pink to be able to include in the board game as well. So, that again, cost kind of varies depending on how many schools we're trying to distribute that to. I would love for it to be just sort of shipped to every school that there is. But, we could kind of start with a smaller sample and move from there, again, for probably a few $100s to really prototype that.
So concretely, a next step would be for you to truly prototype and seek a few community partners at the through LAUSD.
Exactly.
Sorry, I'm curious. This project, was mostly you and your very accomplished wife, Katie, who pulled the cart, and then Andrew and a few students jumped in, but it was all extracurricular. It was not a dedicated class. And come September, you'll have, 2 little ones to spend your time with. So at USC, what I thought was very beautiful at the school that you're associate dean at, that you have like this alumni incubator. That how would you take this project, this concept, out of the classroom into someone who is developing this? Would Andrew, for instance, would you want to develop this further at the alumni incubator at USC?
Yeah, it's definitely like super common to have students from the USC Ivy Young Academy like kind of take these projects and take them so much further out of the classroom. You know, I could totally see like, you know, my peers and I, you know, taking this the next step forward. The interest is there for sure.
Mm-hmm. And has it been a conscious choice to keep it on tactical with paper rather than an app, which seems like so?
It has. So I'm by trade, I'm a workshop designer and write toolkits and things like that. And none of them are technological at all. Mainly because, especially now, we just spend too much time on a screen, and the experiential nature of being able to sit around a table or sit in a car is just so much more gratifying and I think healthy for us as well. So that would be something I'm not interested in, is creating a video game.
Mm-hmm. That's what someone just asked. I saw like what Sister Nancy said, that you know we are in such a state of madness on the freeways, and it gives such a continuous alienation of your environment. And I feel that with these questionings and this interaction will give people a sense of belonging, and that's you know, the beginning of love. So, yeah. Let's see if there's Mark Spears wanted you to know that the west end of Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena would be a good candidate.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a question right above that I would love to respond to. It's from J.A. Houston. It says, it seems that we think more in terms of moving forward in terms of cars. If, for example, driverless cars, while it gets people off freeways, it doesn't move us forward towards less freeways. Is this a dilemma or an answer? I think that's an incredible point, you know, because it's like that is where the conversation's rooted now. We're having these conversations about how do we have like autonomous cars, you know, how do we have more energy efficient cars? You know, but there's that exceptional, you know, Henry Ford quote from about 100 years ago where he says, you know, if I asked people what they would want, they would say they wanted a faster horse. It's like, I personally think that we can do better than cars. And so like all of this like incredible innovation is being done, you know, to get that 1% difference more, you know, make this thing better. I just think we have an incredible opportunity, you know, to look at the roots of human transportation and build, you know, from the ground up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I've always loved the little wisdom that if the railroad companies would have understood that they weren't in the business of laying train tracks, but were in the business of transportation, they would have bought some shares in airplane companies. So yeah, car companies, they will always think car and not what something else could be. Brant and Andy are having a little conversation here about the Highline Coalition, which maybe they can tell us more about it quickly. Brant says it really worked, but I guess there was a whole community initiative that got behind the Highline to change things. So Brant, if you'd like to elaborate, you have 1 minute. Or Andy.
The only observation I have is that they involved the community, and you know it actually got the Whitney to acquire a significant amount of land down in you know, on the lower side of Manhattan and build a new museum, and it completely revitalized the meatpacking district down there. And it was a big deal. I mean, it took many years, but things like that are happening in Los Angeles as well, but just at a much smaller scale. And it would be nice to see it happen, you know, faster.
What I was commenting on, there seems to be a coalition of a Highline network, which is other cities joining in with their own version of the Highline. Ciclavia, which was mentioned earlier, is a part of that in Los Angeles. In St. Louis, for example, the Metroline Link rail line will be transformed into 20 miles of accessible paths. In San Antonio, Texas, a 40-acre urban parks district at the site of the 1968 World's Fair is creating one of the world's great public places. And in Toronto, Canada, a hydro corridor in Scarborough transformed into a 16-kilometer stretch of urban green space and meadowlands that will become one of Canada's largest linear urban parks. So this work is going on around the world, and folks are aligning together to build it, which is exciting.
John Onderdonk, the president of our CSO strategic task force, he he has a good remark in that if you go paper and offline, how do you give feedback to all the planning agencies who could really learn something from this kind of truly street experience, streetwise observations?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one thing to be clear is that at the end of the workshop, we collect all of the sort of materials that people had filled out. So that includes their ideas on Post-its. And so we actually collect that, and we do have that physically. So it's not that it has to be, you know, recorded and sparsed through every time. So that would be able to be digitized. I'm not anti-computer, you know, I just like to create experiences that are offline occasionally. So don't worry.
Yeah, Robin Easton from the city of West Hollywood emphasizes that point too, that she really wants that feedback. She's starving for it. Then Betsy, final remark. I believe there was a discussion a while ago between Highline Network and Friends of LA River. So yeah, it would be, in a few words, what would you really need for next steps?
What I would really need is some interest from the LAUSD or some kind of network of schools, or even a school that would be willing to do a pilot of this with their students. Due to physical distancing, if they are not able to do this as a collective group, this is something that could be assigned for parents even to individually in cars do with their kids, and then have that turn into an online conversation after the ride. The other thing that we would love as a next step is possibly introductions to people that would be interested in helping us turn this into the board game, because that also solves the distancing issue a bit as well.
Hot wheels.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Katie. I'll turn it back to John and Beth.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Andrew, you mentioned the railroads. Around the turn of the century, railroads controlled all intercontinental shipping and transportation. And they could see that roads were being built and airlines were starting to fly mail, and they didn't diversify. And the reason was that they were old guys who smoked cigars and loved choo-choos. And I think this is an example of how we become so enamored with the status quo and the way things are, you know, that our brains hardwire with these neural pathways of behavior. And it doesn't mean that there aren't other ways. Steve Jobs once talked about creativity, and he said all this stuff around us, the computer, the table, the chairs, the house, was invented by people that are no smarter than you. And what that means is new things. We're not stuck with cars, new things can be invented. One other comment, you know, Matthew, I could imagine a version of Cash Cab where you have a joint venture with Lyft. And so you get in your Lyft and you can ride for free as long as you don't throw up. And when you throw up, you have to get out of the car.
That is great.
So one thing I really love about this project, I have a colleague, Alex Boguski, an ad guy, and he said, if saving the world isn't fun, nobody's going to do it. And what I like about your project is it uses humor to illuminate a huge problem that most of us just accept and we don't even see. And so seldom is humor and delight and entertainment used to illuminate really serious subjects, right? We go to the serious, kind of side of those problems. And so I love, I mentioned earlier about the Think NATO process. I really appreciate that you and your team, Andrew, have grabbed onto the crazy idea and brought it to life. And it's certainly creative and innovative. So thanks a lot for that.
Thank you, John. And one of the cards that we had dealt during your workshop was of a pink flamingo. And that's actually why pink became the color for the sort of brand of the project too.
Well, that works with Lyft too.
Yeah, perfect.
So I'll turn it over to Eugene for some final wrap-up comments.
Okay. Yeah, this has been a great event, and thanks to everybody. Thanks to you two, John and Beth, for hosting today. Many thanks to you, Matthew and Andrew, and the entire USC team for creating such an extraordinary initiative. Really wonderful presentation. Everyone, remember, you can see all of the USC presentation materials on our website, pandopopulous.com, and a recording from today should be up by tomorrow on the website. Many thanks to the members of the CSO task force who responded today: Robin Eason, Andy Schrader, Sister Nancy Lyons, Catherine Miller, and Mark Spears. Many thanks to the Pando Days curator, Adam Ewens, festival producer, Shelley Goldstein, producer, Betsy Hunter, and presentation consultant, Judith Parker. Pando Days was conceived with the help of the CSO Strategic Task Force, made possible by the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation, Second Home, the Mary Knowles Sisters, and many others. Make sure to join us next Tuesday at 1 o'clock for the premiere presentation by Cal Poly Pomona of their new initiative, Food Within Reach. You can get a preview of it on our website starting on Friday of this week. Thank you very much again for joining us, and have a great afternoon.
Hey, Eugene.
Yeah.
Can I say one thing? I think Mark Spears gets the best Zoom ceiling award.
Oh, he does.
Thank you. I've been working on that honor. Thank you so much.
We'll get a special trophy made for you, Mark.
I appreciate that. Greatly appreciate it. Virtual trophy, if it were to. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Thanks again.